Today's guest is Monica Hernandez. She's the Chief Executive Officer at Infinity Growth Corporation. Monica, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I appreciate you reaching out. I guess there isn't too many podcasters that covered the material side of things.
They are not, and there is a lot of people that do brilliant stuff, and nobody knows about them. So it's nice that we can, put the word out there that there is a lot of people doing great things.
Sure, I love that aim, and I guess so you started, and there wasn't, still not many of these type of podcasts that talks about materials. Although ours a little bit more on the business side than the material side. But do you have a history of just trying things that other people haven't tried, or you take your own approach?
Yeah, that's kind of my last name. Do things different. Monica, the one that does different things. it's a it's amazing because we are technical people and we are so focused, on all those technicalities and the materials and the performance and all that. But beside all that, we are all human. And when I got, when I escalated from the technical to the leadership area, I realized how much I was lacking on learning things that would help me and that made a better, better everything of me, better leader, better partner, better mom. So it was a very nice discovery to go through, and all that self discovery journey, I guess,
Yeah.
at my age, is what it's nice to see all that, and then you can see the beauty on everything, and then you can connect the dots, and it's like, oh, corrosion is beautiful, everyone hates it, but it's beautiful, and it has a different component. So if you look at things from a different angle, you can always find a different view.
Yeah. So, in terms of corrosion, I mean, that's, we're at the core, we're a coatings business. That's part of corrosion. But what is the part that people, I guess, get wrong? I mean, what's the part that they get stuck on? I think offline we were talking about the liability and stuff like that. But what are the components that kind of get in the way of these conversations?
We have in our company something that is called the golden wheel. And the golden wheel is just a circle and it has process, tools, and people. So it's a circle made of three triangles that are equal. And if one of those components is bigger or smaller, it will affect how your wheel is going to go around and around, like the song, right? So there is many things that can go wrong in each one of those. So people you're not training, or you're not having the support you need. Sometimes ego comes in the way. I know it all, and I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. Or it's rush, so let's just put whatever. But then 3 years later, we are asking ourselves, how come this coating or this lining or this protection didn't lasted as I was expecting? So how come I'm not getting the results I was promised? Well, because maybe the decisions that we were taking are not the correct decisions. So I normally tie this into who's taking the decisions and how are these decisions being made. So it is ultimately who's taking, like, everything that I have seen for 21 years in this industry, always ultimately belongs to who's taking the decision and how is this decision being made.
Yeah. So let's look at it from two angles. One is I think you've been an outside consultant that would consult into organizations. And then let's look at it from internally. And you are trying to convince people. So if you're an external source and you're trying to do the right thing, you made an assessment and you run up in a situation where someone, we've all been there before, knows it all. What can you do? What is the process or the tools or the right people that can handle this?
I think that comes down to communication. And that's when I told you when I was like one of the first, learnings in my career going from the technical to the leadership is we don't know how to talk. And we complain that we have been saying the same thing for 20 years and people don't listen. Well, perhaps we haven't been transferring the message. It's like when you have your kid and it's like, we need to go, let's go, put on your shoes and all that. But it's like, oh gosh. And the little one is like looking at the sky. Oh, it's a beautiful sun. And then you're like, oh gosh, we're late. So communication clearly does not work at that moment. And then it has to be, I always say this is like, who is transferring the message? I am. Who's responsible for that message to be transferred? I am. So who wants to get better at communicate? So I am, because you want to transfer that message. So the first thing is I think we need to understand who are we talking to and what is their interest. And then we need to put things into their terms. Like corrosionists, we love, I remember when I was in inspection and I went into vessels and I came out, I'm like, oh, I found a crack. And everyone wanted to kill me. It's like, that means 3 more days of shutdown. It's like $1 million a day. Where are you smiling? And everyone wanted just to kill me, right? Like, And I discovered that wasn't perhaps the best way of transferring my message, right? So how are you transferring that message? It's like, what is important to whom? Are you talking to technical people? Then get excited. Talk about the microbiome, then it's anaerobic or mic or what is it? But if you're talking to decision makers, you will lose them in a bit if you start talking about, I don't know, the hydrogen, this absorption between the atoms of the metal. It's like, okay, that's way too much information. How much is going to cost? Why do I need to do it? What are going to be the consequences? So if you break the message in those 3 parts, then you will have attention. They will pay attention to what you're saying. So again, communication, like what is the audience? Why is it important? And from the consultant side, you can only say, I have been there. I have seen that already in another of your other plants. And if we don't do these are the consequences. You know the risk. You know how to mitigate it. We can plan for mitigation together if you want, but that will be the person that will take the decision will be informed, and that will be an informed decision, and everyone will be covered at that moment. So that's how I approach. But really, we need to understand who are we talking to.
Got it. Sounds like you have a approach of essentially understanding what the objectives of each individual are, right? And from there, you seem to you craft your message so that you're talking in their language, and you may not be ultimately successful, but you're trying to do everything you can so that it increases the chances of success, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you give your best chance, like you're describing, then it's not going to be on you when something happens. It's going to be on someone else's responsibility. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. Um, you talk a lot about sustainability. I know from the coding and cogence, I understand how that equation works. But then, you know, what do you say to people that look at the energy sector, which may not, in parts, be perceived from the outside as very sustainable? How do you explain that to people, sustainability in and around those industries?
I mean, we are going in a transition. So it's not that, the green is gonna, like, we are now perceived as a dirty, and that is okay. The new sectors, we call it, thermal, geothermal, or solar, or whatever you call it, they will have the same problems because we are building from materials that point, right? So why don't we collaborate together and then we say, okay, let's what has happened, for example, in very acidic conditions in refineries, and then we can take and understand that when we talk about hydrogen, or we have already had a lot of history of CO2. How can that transfer to our carbon capture? We have already structures uh, in and out of land. How is that going to help me understand my solar? So if we work together, and by the way, everyone in the podcast that has come from all those industries has said the same thing. We have the power of minimizing the effect of the environmental impact of anything around 70% at the design phase. For all of the industries, even biomaterials, things that go into your human body. So you can reduce the impact of anything 75%. That's a lot. So if we design better, name the industry that you want. If we just design better in general, then we'll have a more sustainable way of working. And then also, if we look at the life cycle assessment, which we are doing because we want to continue operating this vessel for a little bit longer, or this piping, it was designed for 20 years. Now it's been 40 years on the ground and we want 50 more years. What do we need to do? That's sustainability. So maybe we are closer than we think of that term. It is just how we make the links without having to pinpoint anyone, just collaborating.
Yeah. There's a lot of transferable knowledge and skill to apply to solve, you know, problems in any industry.
Totally, totally, totally. And a lot of the problems that, because when we started in oil and gas, the codes were these little. Now there is different volumes of very thick codes. We have learned a lot, and a lot of people have been hurt. Why do we want to start from zero in any other industry? We can just take those learnings and then apply to whatever is going to be next. And it's a transition which is not going to happen overnight, but we need to start collaborating if we want to be successful at anything.
Yeah. Um, in different industries, like for instance, the high tech industry, very competitive, but there's also a lot of information sharing. You've mentioned this, there's not a lot of sharing that occurs in, for instance, the corrosion industry, or spend a lot more time in the construction industry as well. Why do you think that's the case?
I think people get afraid of uh, losing control, and again, that's who's taking the decision, and that's one component. And there is also the component that who's liable. So, who's is your name or my name on the line, and is your license or mine? And that's why, for example, we have those general contractors, for example, in construction, that or the engineers that are in charge that can have that last say. There are, like, I have worked in other areas, and they are far more open to say, hey, we did this, it was a mistake, we screwed, it cost us a lot, but this is the solution. And those industries are the ones that are getting ahead far more quick than any other. And one example of that is solar. They were by far more open to share things that worked and didn't. And now we have it's exploding on how it is going with new technologies and new applications that we can use that we didn't thought 3 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the podcast that you're doing, that's helping because, some people are willing to talk. What other ways do you think we can facilitate more collaboration in the industry?
I think if we are able to get more diversity on the table, we'll have more voices. I cannot tell you how many times I was the first one. Still, I am in many, many rooms, the first one and the only one. So I am the different one. So it's you have to build certain skills to even be able to say something. So I recall one time I was in API, one of the committees, and I went into the room and question time came in and I had a question. So I walked there and I said my question and they looked at me and they said, "Lady, this committee is for downstream, not for upstream." And that was it. They didn't even address my question. Okay. So it's like, so, but there is a whole lot of assets up north that I am looking at and I know have problems similar. It's just because we cross a boundary, we have different, so it is very interesting to see how if we open, I don't know, our hearts maybe to listen to someone different because they look different or they speak different or because different, whatever, age, gender, you name it. If we have more diversity, it will be more challenging because then everything will not be like, okay, yes, we agree with you. It will be more challenging and then we'll think better because maybe what you're seeing, I am not seeing it because it has never been in my radar.
Got it, for sure. When you start your podcast, what are some of the very interesting insights or lessons that you learned so far?
And that's a nice question. I think the problems are almost the same, regardless of the industry. The struggles are almost the same, and the solutions are almost the same. So it's like,
Could you
regard
throw out some problems you hear? You've touched on a little bit earlier, but then, and what are the solutions?
well, the first solution is bring diversity. Listen, even if you don't like what people say, you don't lose time by not listening. You lose time if you don't listen because then someone may have something interesting that you haven't seen. So I'll give you an example of that. When you are offshore, and when I went offshore so many years ago, there were not baskets in the women's washrooms. But first of all, the first time there was no women washroom. The second time, they built the women washrooms. It was like nice. There were no baskets. So when we were speaking, people are like, "So what?" Well, we need baskets in the women's washroom because we need to dispose things that only women wear. And it's not because the guys are mean and they don't want to put a basket, it's because they don't use those products. So they don't they don't know that we need it. And it's only one female every 3 months that goes at that time. So why they would think about it? So is if you listen to someone that is different, looks different, speaks different, has different age, you will have a lot of that. So that's one solution. Second solution, absolutely, we need to design better. Design better. Like a lot of the cost of corrosion that we have in the world right now. If we stop producing paints or sending people to PhDs, masters, if we just use what we have today, we'll reduce the amount of money that we waste on corrosion between 15 and 35%. That's a lot of money. So if you want to hear money, that's your money. Design better because it will cost you, it will give you back 35%. And sometimes what we are saying has to be adapted to the audience. So your message is conveyed. And also you need to understand that we are talking about things that are today not a problem. That will be a problem in some years. And all of them are asset integrity, corrosion, sustainability. It's not tomorrow, it's not today. But if you take a bad decision today, you will impact down the road big numbers. So that's my 4 conclusions of hearing people, from Peru to US to Canada to Europe to Middle East and Asia, and we all from all the different industries, and that's what they say. We need to design better, we need to communicate better, we need to collaborate, and we need to be able to speak in people's language that message are received in the right way.
Got it. And to design better, what are the tips?
To design better, there are many tips. But for example, to design better, the person that came to the podcast and spoke about biomaterials, they have this program where they take explants. So someone had a hip replaced, and I don't know, the person died or they are changing that implant or whatever. So they take that used implant and send it to the lab, and they assess how much wear the metal had, how the materials have wear. So it's amazing information. And this person receives only like 5% of the explants that we take. So that will give us like we are losing 95% of knowledge on that area just because we don't get it to them. So if we have a facility, even if we have to fill out another extra form, then it's good to have those there because we'll take better decisions for materials. You know, my mom has a hip replaced, and I have never been able to know what she has inside because they've never told us. Worse than that, she's not being looked at for nickel, chromium, or any other metal. And I have gone through a lot of the doctors saying, hey, I have evidence, we need to do this. But it is sometimes the ego comes and is like, who's the doctor? You're me. I'm like, yeah, right? So it comes to that, to design better, use the tools that are available. Many tools. If we talk in my world, we have all those beautiful programs that create RBI. Well, it takes an extra run at the beginning to know if your pipe is designed for sour service and you're designing it for sweet. If it becomes sour, what is going to happen? It doesn't take 15 more days. It takes one extra run. And you will have tools that will provide you with information so you can take an educated decision.
Yeah, for sure. That's just extra step just to get more value.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure. Um, no, it's great. Actually, is there anything that I haven't asked you but you wanted to share?
I think no, that we've covered a lot of good information. Basically, is the message needs to be transferred in a way that is packaged so people listen to it. And those are tools that you develop. That's the good news. You can develop all that. It's not like you wanted to have green eyes and then you were born with brown eyes. Well, you kind of screwed now. But if you want to communicate better, those are all things that you can learn. So that's the good news is regardless of your age, if you're in a position that you want to transfer the message in a better way, there's many tools to get you to that point.